everybody, it's Paige Evans and I'm excited to share a mini album process video with you today. Usually I just do layouts. Today it is going to be mini albums. So Vicki Boutin was sent my Pick Me Up collection and I was sent her mixed media wonderful goodness. I used to be scared of mixed media, but not anymore. So I started with this Graphic 45 tag-shaped album. There are 9 tags and I needed to get a base on each tag, so I used Gesso and Vicki's lovely paintbrushes. These work like a dream, and I applied a coat of Gesso on the front and back side of each tag. And prepping the backgrounds with Gesso helps the mixed media stay in place better. It applies much better when there is Gesso in the background. So I've done the front side of each tag, and now I'm going to go ahead and do the back side of every tag. The exact same process, just applying a coat of Gesso. And then I used a hairdryer to speed lots of things up in this process. There is a lovely set of watercolors by Vicki Boutin, and so I squeezed some of my favorite colors onto this plate that I use for painting. If you are using the watercolors for the first time, you do have to use the cap to pierce a hole to get access to the watercolors inside. I don't immediately use them, but I wanted to have them handy. Now I am using one of Vicki Boutin's stencils and her art crayons. You can see all the art crayons up there on the top left, and I'm just gonna delve right in. I watched a lot of Vicki's videos to get ideas about how to use some of these products that I was quite unfamiliar with, and I found a lot of wonderful and inspiring ideas by her, so I will definitely leave a link to Vicki's YouTube channel so you can also get inspired by her. So I am applying these art crayons directly onto this stencil with the intention of using it kind of as a stamp on my very first tag. I'm filling up one of her spray bottles. This is a Vicki Boutin spray bottle with water, and spraying the stencil to turn them kind of into watercolors. I'm flipping it upside down and then spraying more water and pressing it gently. I didn't want to get my hands dirty, but I kind of gave up and just went with the flow and got messy. So here I'm pressing it more into the tag to create a stamp, and I peeled it off and I love the way that looks. Pretty fun. So I'm going to add more water and using Vicki's brushes, going to paint over it a little bit just to add more water and get colors to blend around, soak up some of the color with a paper towel. And then I'm going to come in with the exact same stencil, find the exact same placement, and bring in some modeling paste. Using a palette knife, I'm going to scrape it across, and this is going to give it some more lovely texture. Mixed media, one of the best things about mixed media is the texture, so I love how that looks. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. And I'm just going to add it in a few more places to fill in some of the empty spots on the tag. So this was the first tag that I made and I was hooked. I wanted to try so many different techniques. So for this tag, I'm using the Vicki Boutin matte acrylic gel, and I had to open it first. There was a little piece of paper stopping it. And then I'm going to use a little bit of an art crayon and mix it into the matte gel to create a colored paste. And I'm just going to scrape it across the background of this tag for a unique look. The more you mix it, the more vibrant the color will be. I just wanted a light pastel orange. And then I'm going to come in with another one of her stencils. It's a butterfly stencil, and this is some of her gold glaze. And I'm going to use the same palette knife and scrape it over the butterflies. And they're so shimmery and gold and pretty. I need to perfect my stenciling skills because it does seep underneath. And I think that's just something that comes with practice. You learn the right angles, and yeah, practice makes perfect. Get a little better. So now I'm using Vicki's glitter, There is like a chunky glitter, a more fine glitter, and then a super fine glitter. These are all gold. And so I started with the thickest first, came in with the medium, and applied the finest glitter last into the wet glaze. You need to make sure the glaze is still wet when you apply the glitter so it will stay in place. So that's another tag. Moving on to the third tag, coming in with, this is iridescent glaze, and this is a hearts background cut file that I designed. So I just cut it smaller and applied it directly onto this tag. Once it dried, I'm using the Daiquiri Ice acrylic paint. I love this minty blue color, and I'm going to use water and drip it down this tag. I love this color. I love the texture that's created by the hearts, and so by doing this, I'm just creating more color, more texture. That's basically the name of the game with this mini albums, is creating color, texture, patterns, layers, and fun. So I'm letting it drip onto this transparency on the back, and I'm not going to waste it, so I will bring in another tag to mop it up. You'll see me do that in a little bit. For now, I'm just going to splash some more of this light blue paint across this tag. So here you go, grabbing another tag, mopping up some of that paint because I don't want to waste it. It's such a pretty color. I'll use it definitely later. Over this sticker pack, there's a transparency with watercolors, and I just loved the way it looked, and so I wanted to add it as a layer on top. So I stapled it at the top using, that's a Tim Holtz tiny attacher, and then trimmed around it. This isn't the final placement. I actually decided to use this for my cover, and I'll take it apart. You'll see me do that a little bit later, but for now, I'm just trimming this packaging material basically into a tag shape. And then I need to repunch the hole through the hole at the top. Cool. Adding another staple, even though I'm going to remove the staple. All right, next tag. This is another Vicki Boutin stencil, some wonky circles, and now I'm going to use her watercolors and some modeling paste, going to mix the red in and create a nice, pretty light pink modeling paste. Same palette knife. Once it's all mixed together, I'm going to scrape it as carefully as I can, but not too careful because it's all part of the process and the look, the homespun look, and scrape it across the stencil to create a pretty light pink texture on this background. Once it dried, I don't show this, but I did come in with my sewing machine and I stitched circles all around. Maybe I do show you. I shouldn't get ahead of myself, and I can't remember because it took me like a week to film all of these. Okay, yes, so here I am with my sewing machine. I've sewed some loosely shaped circles over the circles and going to trim the threads. On this tag, I'm going to play with the art crayons some more using Vicki's brushes and just start splashing art crayons across the background so it kind of looks like sprinkles. In between most layers, I will use a hair dryer to make it dry faster so that the colors don't blend. Sometimes I love the blended look, but in this case I wanted the drops to be individually shaped. So I will dip my brush in the water, touch it to the art crayons, to get some of that color, and then splash it, dab it, splash it onto the tag. And I do this for a while because I want to use all the colors because you know me, I love lots and lots and lots and lots of colors. The more the merrier. And I just wanted this album to be very colorful. So I started with the lightest colors and then I'm working my way through the rainbow and finishing with the darkest colors. You could also do this with Vicki's acrylic paints or even the actual watercolors, but I just wanted to try something different. Then I'm going to come in with some a Tim Holtz stencil, and again with the iridescent glaze, the palette knife, and I'm going to scrape it across the stencil. And then I will come in with the silver mixology. That's what Vicki calls the glitter, is mixology. and coming in with just the super fine silver glitter, and while the glaze is still wet, I'm going to sprinkle it on top so it gets stuck in that glaze. And then shake off the excess, try and get it back into the jar. This is the back side of that paper that I dabbed up the extra blue paint. Next tag, this is another fun technique with the art crayons, is grab an acrylic stamping block and then draw with the crayons directly on the acrylic stamping block. I'm just drawing stripes. And then spritz it with some water, and then this is called the kissing technique, where you kind of stamp it and just press it onto the tag. And there was a lot of water. You could use more water, less water. I really liked the running look, so I liked all the excess water. And then just kiss it onto the tag. Once that dried, I at first used all the warm colors, and now I'm coming in with cool colors and repeating the process on the acrylic stamping block. Doing stripes of cool colors, spritz it with water, and then come back in and do the kissing technique. Just dab it, move it around, dab it again until you get the look that you want. I love that every time you do this, it's going to look different. Different results. Dry it up with a hairdryer. Moving right along to another tag, I'm going to do the packaging technique. So I've just got some spare plastic packaging. I'm going to use the watercolors again this time and apply it onto the packaging and then smush it onto the tag. So very technical, but the results are really pretty and fun and interesting, and it's one of those techniques again where you will get different results every time you do it. So it's fun. Give it a try. You know, instead of throwing away that packaging material, just use it as a base for doing this technique. So I'm using some of the cooler colors to create this pretty tag. Yellows and greens and blues, and I love how the colors will sort of blend together. And again, these are all from Vicki Boutin's Watercolors. Very beautiful colors in that set. I feel like I should play some music in these parts so you can just watch what I'm doing. Once that dried, coming in with the clear glaze again and some of my own glitter from my stash, mixing it together with the palette knife, and then going to use another Tim Holtz stencil to add funky circles. And I love using this glaze as a medium to get the glitter to all stick together, because glitter I want to say glitter isn't my favorite. I've come to love it more, but it's still like, glitter everywhere. But it's another fun layer. So scraping it across the background with that stencil and the knife, and if you look, you can just see that it creates another layer. Moving right along to another tag. These are Vicki Boutin stamps. There's also coordinating metal dies, and I'm going to use the art crayons as kind of like you would with an ink pad and just color over the stamp. So I'm going to create a bunch of blue flowers with yellow centers. There are a few different shades of blue art crayons, so I'll just color it in, spritz it with that water, and then stamp it onto the tag. While it's still wet, you can add more crayons, and this is just something to play with, whether you want to use more water or less water. It will give you completely different results, and I like mixing the two, so some of them I've stamped with less water and some I stamped with more water so that the colors ran and blended together. And that was another tag. Moving right along, this tag actually becomes the back page. I'm using modeling paste and another stencil. This one is by Kaisercraft. It's called Bloom, and it's 6x6, and just scraping the modeling paste across the stencil. Seen this before. I stitched around it and then I flipped it over, and I'm going to paint some black stripes. Vicki does have black acrylic paint. It hadn't come in the mail yet, so I just used my own black acrylic paint, but I'm sure hers is just as, if not more awesome. And just going to hand paint some loose black stripes for a fun contrast. I love the high contrast of the black and white. Looking good. I got a little bit of paint on one of the empty stripes, that's all right. So here I have done that art crayon on the acrylic stamping block kissing technique onto smooth white cardstock that was gessoed first, and then I ran it through my Silhouette Cameo using my butterfly background cut file, and this is a technique that I showed in a previous video, and I used most of these butterflies on a layout, but I did repeat the process and use the butterflies to fill up a whole nother tag. Just wanted to show you once again this process. I did stitch through the butterflies, and then I'm bending up the wings for lots of dimension. I love the shadows and dimension it creates by bending up the wings. Now I'm going to work on the cover, so I die cut London from 2 different fonts 3 times because I thought I was going to layer them together to make them thicker, but I did want to do some mixed media on them, of course, because that's the name of the game for this mini album is mixed media. So I came in with gesso, and just like I primed the tags, I'm priming the titles. And I didn't know which font I wanted to use. I liked them both. So I decided to use art crayons on both of them, and once again on an acrylic block, I'm using my favorite colors of the rainbow to create 16 little squares of color, pretty evenly spaced. So that worked out nicely. And then I will once again spray it with water and dab it all over the die cuts. And I just love the pretty bright colors. And I know I've already said it, but you could do this a million times and you'll get different results every time. So after I dried that layer, I came back in with the same stamped acrylic block. I hadn't wiped off the crayons yet, so if you just spritz more water on it, you can use it a few different times. Then it'll need some help being peeled off the cardstock. It kind of just blends together once you add that gesso. It sticks together. I decided to go with the thicker font for my title. It's going, well, obviously says London, and I'm going to hand stitch around the edges to create even more texture, and I just really love hand stitching. So I'm using white thread for a simple contrast and doing a back stitch. So I pierced the holes by hand using a piercing needle and pierced all the way around and then finished hand stitching. I will come back in and show you what I did with that a little bit later, but I had another idea that I wanted to quickly get started with. So I'm using acrylic paints and the brushes, and I'm going to dab paints all across this tag using a rainbow of colors. And it turned out very, very bright, so what I did is came over it with a layer of acrylic paint. I might have even used gesso just to tone it down a little bit because it was very, very bright, and even though I love bright colors, I just wanted to tone it down a little bit. So here's what it looks like as I was finishing up, and then I didn't show it, but I did cover it with some white paint a little bit. Here are more of Vicki's stamps, and I wanted to do some embossing. So I'm using watermark ink and stamping it across this tag. You can't see it in the camera, but I could see it, so I wasn't overlapping the stamps very much. And then I will use white embossing powder by American Crafts, pour it over where I've stamped, remove the excess, missed a spot, decided I wanted to fill in a gap right there and just scooped the powder onto where I stamped it because it was right there, and then I'll pour the excess powder back into the jar. Then come in with the heat embossing gun and emboss the design. So that's a really fun texture. So here I made some more butterflies. That was the beautiful background that I have not thrown away. I want to use it somehow, maybe as a background for a layout. And since I used all the butterflies that I showed before on a layout, I made more to use on a tag. But first, here's where I decided that I wanted to put the title on this packaging material that I had created before. So I just removed it carefully from that tag, and now I'm going to adhere the title on top. And I love how it's just a separate piece now, and it has more focus. It's got more attention on it now because it's separate. So I used foam squares to attach the title in place, and I thought about putting a butterfly on that cover page, but it was a little too distracting. So instead, I just grabbed another tag and placed the butterflies all over it. And these butterflies just make me so happy because they're so colorful and so layered and so textured, and I love having the strings long. Yeah. Okay, moving on to another tag. I don't show this process all the way, but I painted it with pink, and then I created more modeling paste and went over it with another stencil to create a very pink page because I love pink. And on this tag, we're finishing up now, I found some bubble wrap, and these are Vicki Boutin acrylic paints. I'm just painting it onto the bubble wrap in, I think, 6 colors, 6 of my favorite colors. I really love these acrylic paints. They're so thick and colorful. You know, they're not watered down like some acrylic paints that I've used in the past, so I highly recommend these acrylic paints. Just loosely painting 6 squares onto this bubble wrap. Again, this is one of those times I need music. Playing in the background, fill up the empty moments. I'm excited to finally document these photos of our trip to London. I love making travel mini albums, so I'm happy to have this one in the books. Hardy har. So I sprayed it with some water. I am flipping it upside down and I'm going to use a brayer to apply the paint. And that just looks so cool. I did come in with another layer of white on top of that bubble wrap. And on this tag, I'm using another cut file that I designed and Vicki's silver glaze to just have a repeating love down this tag. Very simple, but I feel like some of the other tags were very complex and colorful, so I wanted to balance things out by having more simple tags paired with more complicated tags. Easy peasy. I wanted to create a sequin pocket, so I used just a tag as a template to cut around. This is a page protector, so I cut it just a slightly bigger, and then come in with my sewing machine and stitch around the open edges, but you want to leave the top open so you can still pour the sequins inside. Just used a basic running stitch and white thread. And then I've got my sequins, and I'll pick some of my favorite colors that are coordinating with this mini album. So for the first layer, I'm going to use these aqua sequins, make sure they're in the bottom, and then I'm going to stitch right above them. So they're going to stay in that little section forever. For the next row, I'm going to use, not sure yet, blue. So I'll pour blue sequins in there, and same thing, stitch a line above it so it stays in place, and then I will repeat with, I think I used yellow sequins, or was it orange? Orange sequins, and then finish off with pink sequins. This time I stitched the tag closed, and I'll use another tag as a template to pierce a hole at the top. That tag underneath I didn't show how to do, but I used Vicki's gold glaze and a stencil, just scraped it across, and I love that filler tag. Over the embossed flowers that I showed you how to do a little bit ago, I'm going to use Vicki Boutin's watercolors and watercolor over these flowers. And again, I thought it was too bright, which can be, I mean, it's good to have really bright colors, but I wanted to tone it down. So once I did all the watercoloring, I lifted up some of the color with water and paper towels. So here you can just see I'm picking up some watercolors, trying to get all the colors because this is a very colorful album. And then once this was finished, it was just a matter of putting everything in order and adding the photos and a few embellishments. And I don't show you how to do that because that took a really long time, but hopefully through the flip through you can see where I added my photos and embellishments and some journaling. So I will finish up with a flip through with some music in the background. If you have any questions at any time, please let me know. I'm happy to answer them, and I hope you pick up some of this Vicki Boutin mixed media magic and overcome your fears if it's something that intimidates you, because I know that I am now addicted, and I hope you will be too. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the flip through, and I will see you again soon.